So in this video, I'm going to teach you about user input. So user input is anything like a player pushes any keys on their keyboard, clicks on their mouse, or even touch a screen. So anything related to that is going to be user input. And the reason why it's really useful is because you can do stuff like if a player pushes a key on the keyboard, it shoots a fireball, or it reloads a gun, or if you click on your mouse, it shoots a gun, or even swings a sword. So anything like that is usually related to user input. So I'm going to teach you how to code that. So I'm going to go ahead and start by making a local script. And the reason why we're using a local script instead of a server script is because only the player's computer can access the keyboard and mouse and anything like that. So a server script would not be able to interact with it. So there's generally two ways to make user input. There's something called UserInputService and the other one called Context Action Service. I'll be teaching you the UserInputService because that's a bit of a more beginner-friendly method. But generally, in professional fields, more people use Context Action Service rather than UserInputService. But it's very common to use both of them since they both are different. So I'm going to start by making a variable for UserInputService, like so. And then we'll be using a event from the service. So it's called, there's two main events you usually use for this. It's input begin and input ended. So you can read it right there, but in short words, input begin fires a function whenever you mess with a keyboard or a mouse, whereas input ended fires whenever you let go of like a key or let go of a mouse click. So I'm going to connect to a function right here, and then we can pull up the documentation right here. I'll leave a link in the description, so you can always read this and see what it does and what it has. But I'm just going to show you the parameters so far. So it has two parameters: input object and the game process event. So I'm just going to write that down. Input object, and I'm just going to call it GPE for short. So if you read the input object, it just says it's an object which contains information, which is not very useful. So we're going to open this up in another tab to see what it contains. So there's a lot of words here, but if we scroll down, you can see we have a list of properties for this object. So the main ones you'll be using, it will usually be key code. So I'm just going to type in if input object dot key code is equal to enum.keycode, and now we get this entire list. So this contains a list of essentially almost every single like button. So if I do E, for example, I'm just going to put a print player pressed E. Go ahead and run this. You can see whenever I push down E, it prints in the output right there. And then if we were to instead use input ended instead of input began, go and test that. You can say I push down E, but it's not printing, but when I let go, it prints E, like so. So we're just going to stick with input began. And then if we look at the information for GPE, see what that is, game process event. So this is essentially saying if you're messing with a GUI while doing some user input, this would be true. The most common usage for this is, so I'm just print GPE. I should put it in the if statement. So you can see right now it's false, but if we were to text in the chat and press E, you can see that's true. So most people use it to prevent from activating stuff while you're chatting. So because it is true when you're chatting, you can do it and GPE is not equal true. And now if we were to type it in the chat, it won't print anymore. And that's really all there is to user input for the user input service method. So I'll be showing an example right here of how this would be a bit more of a practical example. So let's say I want to make like a sprinting script, for example. So in order to change the player's walk speed, I have to get the humanoid object of the player. So I'm going to make some variables here. Local character, and then humanoid. And you see I use this function called waitForChild. The reason why I'm using waitForChild instead of doing like this, for example, is because local scripts have a problem that they run before objects load. so we don't actually know if the humanoid will exist by the time the script runs. So I'm using wait for child to wait for that object. So now instead of doing printing, we're just going to change the speed, block speed to 50. Now for it to run it. You see when I press E, it changes my speed. But let's say you want it to be shift instead of E, you just remove this and do left shift. So now if we're to run it, you can see when I push down shift now, it changed my speed. But when I let go, it doesn't change back. So we need to do that as well. So I'm just going to copy and paste this. Instead of using input begin, we're going to use input ended. So this fires whenever I let go shift. And then instead of 50, I'll do 16, which is the default humanoid walk speed. So I'm holding down shift, I run, and I let go shift, and I stop. So that's just a basic sprinting system. And that's the end of the video, guys. If you like it, feel free to give it a like and subscribe. Also join my Discord if you want to hang out or have any questions.